You have 5 minutes to live. You know the exact minute it ends. The rifles are already raised. You can see the men holding them. So, what do you do with 5 minutes? This isn't a thought experiment. A man actually stood there in the snow and had to answer it. And the answer he found in those 5 minutes would haunt and fuel everything he ever wrote. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky. Today he's one of the greatest novelists who ever lived. Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, books that crawl inside the human soul and turn on the lights. But on this morning, December 22nd, 1849, he is 28 years old, and he has been brought to a public square to be shot. To understand how he got here, you have to understand the year. This is Tsarist Russia, an autocracy. One man, Tsar Nicholas I, rules absolutely. There is no free press, no free speech. To criticize the government is a crime against God and the crown. And Dostoevsky, young and idealistic, had joined a group. The Petrashevsky Circle, a few dozen writers and students who met in a St. Petersburg apartment to do something forbidden, read banned books, argue about freedom, dream about a Russia without serfdom, without human beings owned like cattle. Mostly, they just talked. But one night Dostoevsky read aloud a letter, a banned letter by the critic Vissarion Belinsky that attacked the church and the Tsar in the same breath. Reading it out loud was enough. April 23rd, 1849, before dawn. The secret police come for him. He's taken to the Peter and Paul Fortress, a prison island in the freezing Neva River, and there he sits in a stone cell for 8 months. Then, one December morning, without warning, they take him out. He thinks maybe he's being released. Instead, a carriage carries him through the snow to Semyonovsky Square, and he sees it. Troops formed in a hollow square, a crowd gathered to watch, and 3 wooden posts driven into the frozen ground. 21 prisoners are lined up in the cold. They are read their sentence. Death by firing squad. Today. A priest steps forward, holding a cross, and tells them to confess. They are dressed in long white peasant shrouds, execution gowns, with hoods that will be pulled down over their faces. The hems drag in the snow, and then the guards divide them into groups of 3. Because there are only 3 posts, you will be shot 3 at a time. The first 3 are marched forward and tied to the stakes. Their hoods are pulled down, and Dostoevsky watches, because Dostoevsky is in the second group of 3, which means he is next, which means he has, by his own reckoning, about 5 minutes left to live. Now, stop here, because this is the moment the whole story turns on. Not the execution, the 5 minutes. 20 years later, Dostoevsky will give these exact 5 minutes to a character, Prince Mishkin, in his novel The Idiot, and have him describe what goes through a condemned man's mind when he knows, to the minute, when he will die. The man divides the time. A few minutes to say goodbye to the others. A couple of minutes to think about himself, one last time. And the rest, just to look around. And he is seized by one unbearable thought, that he is still alive now. That in 5 minutes he will be something else. No one knows what. But right now, this minute, he exists. And he thinks, what if I didn't have to die? What if they gave me my life back? I would turn every minute into an age, he thinks. I would not waste one. That is a man discovering, in the worst possible way, that life is infinitely valuable. 5 minutes before it's taken. And in the real square, on that real morning, something else happened. Dostoevsky turned to the man beside him, a fellow prisoner named Nikolai Speshnev, a committed atheist, and according to the accounts said, "We shall be with Christ." And Speshnev answered, "A handful of dust." Hold those 2 sentences next to each other, because that is the entire question this channel exists to ask, spoken by 2 men about to die in the same snow. One looks at death and sees a door, we shall be with Christ. The other looks at the same death and sees an ending, a handful of dust, ashes, nothing. And here is what's so honest and so terrible about this moment. Neither man was a fool. Speshnev wasn't being edgy. He was being precise. Stand in front of rifles, strip away comfort, and the rational eye sees exactly what he saw. A body about to stop, dust to dust. And Dostoevsky, who would spend the rest of his life defending faith, heard him. He never pretended the dust wasn't there. That's the thing people miss about him. His belief didn't skip over the doubt. It went straight through the center of it. The drums began to roll. The soldiers in front of the first three raised their rifles, took aim. And then a sound, a carriage racing into the square. An officer standing, waving a white handkerchief. The guns came down. A new sentence was read. The Tsar, in his infinite mercy, had spared their lives. Except, it was never real. Nicholas I had signed the reprieve days earlier. The execution, the posts, the shrouds, the priest, the 5 minutes, all of it was theater. A performance staged down to the second, designed to break these men with terror and then hand them their lives back as a gift from the throne. It worked. One of the prisoners, a young man named Grigoriev, never recovered. He went mad in that square and stayed mad. And Dostoevsky? Dostoevsky was sentenced to 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp. Chains, frozen barracks, murderers and thieves for company. But that same evening, hours after standing in front of the rifles, he sat down and wrote a letter to his brother, Mikhail. And it does not read like a broken man. He wrote, "Life is a gift. Life is happiness. Every minute could have been an eternity of happiness. And never has there been such an abundance of life in me as now. And I shall be reborn for the better." Think about that. He's just been tortured. He's headed to Siberia in chains. And what he feels is not despair. It's the thing the condemned man felt. That unbearable awareness that to be alive at all is enormous. Most of us only get it for 5 minutes. He got to keep it. On the way to Siberia, in a freezing transit station, a woman pressed a book into his hands. The New Testament. It was the only book prisoners were allowed to own. He kept it for the rest of his life. He read it in the camp. He underlined it. He died with it on his desk. And the man who came out of Siberia 4 years later was not the man who went in. He went in a young radical who believed politics could perfect the world. He came out believing that the human heart was the real battlefield, and that the thing it was starving for was not revolution. It was meaning. It was God. But, and this is the part you cannot skip, he did not come out certain. Near the end of his life, in a private notebook, he wrote the truest thing he ever said about his own faith. "It is not as a child that I believe and confess Jesus Christ. My Hosanna has passed through a great furnace of doubt." A furnace of doubt. Not faith instead of doubt. Faith forged in it. Hammered out on the same anvil as Speshnev's handful of dust. He carried both men out of that square. The believer and the doubter. For 40 years. In the same chest. And he never picked one for you. He wrote the doubt as powerfully as he wrote the faith, on purpose, because he thought a faith that hadn't faced the strongest possible doubt wasn't worth anything. That's the inheritance, not an answer, a refusal to look away from the question. So let me hand it to you, because here is the quiet horror of this story. You have already been reprieved. You are not going to be shot at dawn. And that is exactly why you waste your minutes. The condemned man knew something you've spent your whole comfortable life forgetting. That every single minute could be an age, and that you are letting them fall through your fingers like they're free. Dostoevsky stood 5 minutes from the end, and the gift he was given wasn't certainty about what comes after. Speshnev's dust and Dostoevsky's Christ both walked out of that square alive, still disagreeing. What he was given was the minutes, the same ones you have right now, reading this. So the question the snow asked him, it's asking you, if you really felt it, that this could end, that it will, what would you do with 5 minutes? You have more than that. For now, wait and hope.